Welcome. I'm Leping Beck. I have a special guest today, Dr. Ming Wang. Welcome to our program.
Thank you.
Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you, Leping.
Hey, can you have a little brief introduction about yourself?
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, Leping, at your show. And I'm living in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm a practicing ophthalmologist.
Okay.
I perform laser vision correction, such as LASIK and cataract surgery.
Okay.
And I'm originally from China, an immigrant. And recently I have a movie called Sight, which will be released by Universal Studios on October 27th in theaters across the United States.
Yes, I heard about that movie, and it just won a big award, which is it's called ICVM. Is that correct?
Yes.
What is ICVM?
Yeah, it stands for International Christian
Value.
Visual Media. So basically, it's one of the big Christian film awards.
So it's like the Academy Award for Christian
films.
movies.
Yes.
Okay. Wow!
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So then that movie is a Christian movie, and are you a Christian?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So this movie, you said it's the movie is a fiction, right? It's not documentary, because people would immediately ask, is that documentary about you, or it's a fiction?
It's a feature film.
Okay.
And based on true story.
So the true story, you are
Yes.
the true story.
Yes, yeah, it's based on my autobiography, From Darkness to Sight, which you have a copy. I think, in your
Yes,
hand.
yeah. Thank you for the signed copy.
Thank you.
And so the movie is based on this book.
Yes.
Right? This book. And From Darkness to Sight. And so what's your relationship with the movie maker?
Okay. I wrote the book many years ago, 10 years ago. And the reason I wrote the book was to tell the story about my life as immigrant from China to America, and have come to appreciate the freedom that we have. And also our responsibility as immigrant to contribute, and also our need as Chinese Americans to tell America what we do. So these are the motivations for the book.
Okay.
And then about 8-9 years ago, a studio approached me, said they would like to make it into a film.
Oh.
And I said, well, it'll be fine as long as you can make a film that is truthful to the original story.
Okay. What do you think? How it was the movie? After you saw, because you didn't make the movie.
Yeah.
It's a whole movie
Team,
crew
yeah.
with the team that made the movie.
Yeah.
And how do you think? Did they do a good job based on your story?
They did a beautiful job, beautiful job. And Sight is probably one of the most powerful, emotionally captivating films that I haven't seen. And it's not just my own biased experience, so to speak, but also others. That's why it won the top prize, the grand prize for the best picture at the ICVM International Christian Film Awards. Yeah.
Wow.
Beating several hundred great Christian films from around the world.
Wow. What an achievement. So why did they pick this book? The movie makers, the producer and the director, why did they pick this book? Do you know why?
Probably has to do with the fact that I've been doing eye care for many patients. I've performed 55,000 laser vision corrections, including on over 4,000 doctors. So many of my patients are Hollywood stars, country music stars.
Okay.
Yeah, many of them, Dolly Parton, Kenny Chesney, many
I'm
others.
her fan.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so these are wonderful artists, and so probably the word got around that.
So
I've been
that's how
doing
the
good.
word got around.
And also been focusing on part of my effort to help blind orphan children through our charity. So that's probably where to get around as well.
Right.
From some of these celebrity patients.
Right. But thank you for the book. I just received the book. I haven't read it. I'm pretty sure it's a wonderful story. They didn't pick it just because you know some movie stars. I believe this is a beautiful story. So why did you write this book?
As immigrant who have been to the United States since age 21, 40 years ago, I've learned something that is so important for Chinese Americans, and for that matter, immigrants, all of us, to do something to communicate to America what we do. You know, as Chinese Americans, sometimes we complain about some of the things that we feel like we are not being treated as fairly by the American society. For example, our kids, you know, have hard time getting into top universities in America.
There's a lawsuit pending. We all know that. Yes.
Exactly. So the Chinese students, the score has to be very high to even get into the top schools.
Average.
Higher than average.
The
and
other
groups. Yeah. And so I think that sometimes, you know, it's easier to blame on others and say, oh, it's because somebody else done things wrong and discrimination something. But what I find, it is much more productive for all of us, in this case Chinese Americans, to look inwardly ourselves. What is that we can do better? And I've come to realize that as Chinese Americans, we have our strength and we have our weakness. Strength is that we do a good job in what we do ourselves. We take good care of our own family, and we do a good job in our own job. In fact, lots of Americans say, why Chinese Americans, you know, tends to progress well in companies, you know, and immigrants just being here a few years, they already accumulate enough wealth to buy houses and stuff.
They're good at accumulating wealth.
Exactly. So what is it, you know, why is that? And I want to use my own life story to tell that I'm just one of the Chinese American communities that it's because Chinese Americans work hard, harder than many other folks. And also Chinese Americans tend to be very frugal. We don't waste, you know, we save up, and we, you know, save up to buy those houses, and we save up to provide best education for our children. I want to relate to the world the strength of Chinese Americans, that we play a fair game, and we should be treated equally. And the reason we do reasonably well academics in universities and in business is because we work really hard. But at the same time, I want to speak to my own fellow Chinese Americans through this book to point out what needs to be improved in Chinese Americans. You know, that is, we tend to say something, we do it, but also in America, in open Western society, we have to be able to do it and also communicate. And we're not communicating enough to American society who we are, what we do, and how we do it, in terms of working hard, in terms of being motivated, because that is giving us an opportunity to let America know that we do contribute to America, but also to learn from other races, other ethnic groups, what is that we need to improve. In this case, we have to tell our own stories to America.
Well, I totally agree with you. You know, as I grew up in China too, so I know the Chinese culture, you know, is based on Confucianism. The Confucian, like you need to be modest. So they don't encourage, from kids, they don't encourage you to speak up.
Right.
So that's kind of the cultural thing too.
Yes.
So you would encourage the kids to say, hey, speak up.
Yes.
And say what you want.
Yes, it's a film called Sight. So sight you can interpret in many different ways. Physical sight, that my book and the movie talk about the remarkable journeys some of our blind orphan children patients from our Sight Foundation, their remarkable journey from darkness to sight. And also sight could be also interpreted as emotional sight, spiritual sight. I'm a Christian, and also societal side, if you will. That is, I want to share with my fellow Chinese Americans that we need to see beyond our own culture. Exactly. We have to see beyond ourselves, to see beyond our circumstance, and to see beyond our pain and suffering and all people. But mostly, I think America today, we all need to see beyond our polarization. We're too fixated on differences rather than appreciating what we all have in common as fellow Americans, which is our love for this country and our desire to work together for the sake of this nation, love each other despite our differences, and work through our differences.
Well, I would say most Americans would agree with you, for sure. You mentioned the strong suit of the Chinese people, and you also mentioned one of the weaknesses of the Chinese culture, which is not communicating enough. Are there any other cultural differences or elements that you think that hinder the Chinese from being heard?
I think probably two aspects. One is what I just mentioned. We need to be more proactive in telling our stories. Sometimes people say, oh, Ming, you made a movie. You just want to say something good about yourself. No, it's not the point. My point is by my being able to make that little first step, I'm trying to encourage the Chinese American community to be more proactive, speak up, and tell our stories. So I want to use my own self-example. Among Chinese Americans, many of them have done work in their respective fields much, much better than me. I consider myself a little bit above average, but most of us, including myself, we are not telling our stories. So the movie side is I'm making that little first step, but my real goal is to encourage the rest of Chinese American communities, doesn't matter which field they are in, to be bolder, to tell our stories. And that's how we can communicate to America what we do, who we are, achieve better understanding, but also communication is two ways. When we communicate to American society, we also get the opportunity to learn from other cultures, from African American, Latin Americans, Caucasian Americans, all these. And along the line of the things that we should improve in addition to communication, to answer your question, the other big aspect is see beyond ourselves, meaning do something that we could actually impact our society. In my case, I just don't want to focus on my medical practice alone. I want to be able to do something that impacts the society. In this case, medical invention to help blind patients, but also specifically medical charity to help blind orphan children from around the world. For example, among the major issues impacting American society is economy, healthcare, education. Chinese Americans, we do have we do know what we're talking about to a large degree about education because we educate our own kids very well. They are in top schools and all that. But while Chinese Americans are good in educating our own kids, we're not contributing as much as we should have to American education, being part of the school board, being part of the policymakers' educational material teaching method. And that's the area we know what we're talking about.
That's a very good point. So what did you do yourself?
I do is I'm not an educator, so I'm not in the school board or education curriculum, but I'm a doctor, so I have two ways of doing it. I can just focus on my own practice, but I said, well, if a medical practice, I know what I'm talking about. I want to broaden it. I want to contribute to American mainstream society, try to help solve some of the problems in healthcare. In this case, indigent care. People who don't have money to pay for it. And if a government have socialistic insurance system that will bankrupt our country, so what is it we can do as physicians to help resolve the problem of some folks could not afford the care? So I participate there. I devise a solution that involves a group of doctors. We donate a small portion of our services for patients who could not pay. That's our foundation.
Wow.
So in a small way, I'm not just confined to my own work. I try to use my expertise, in this case medicine. In my case, it's not education. I'm not educated. I'm a doctor, but I can use it to help America solve some of the main problems in this healthcare for the indigent population.
Wow, that's such a gift. I mean, I can't imagine to so many people. I can imagine like somebody who can't see, who can't afford it, and then they receive such gift that literally changed their life.
Yes.
So how many of those, you and your group of doctors, how many of those surgeries have you performed?
I have to provide care directly and indirectly.
Okay.
Directly are the surgeries that I have personally performed in laser vision correction, nearsightedness, farsightedness, astigmatism, presbyopia, the old aging eye, and also cataract.
Right.
I've performed over 55,000 surgeries.
Just yourself?
Yeah, myself, 55,000, including on over 4,000 doctors.
Wow.
So my patients come from about 40 states in America and 55 countries worldwide. So that's the direct care. And I've been doing this for 30 years.
Wow.
Indirect care is this. I invented a technology that can help restore eyesight in some of these patients who have trauma, infection, damage to the eye. And not only invented technology, I teach doctors from around the world how to use that technology for the last 23 years.
Wow.
So that technology has now been used by tens of thousands of eye doctors throughout the world in nearly every nation, and millions of patients from around the world has been helped.
Wow.
Have been helped. So that's indirect work, okay? And
I can see why they pick you to make that movie.
thank you.
This is outstanding. Wow. So I also heard that you have a foundation that you're trying to inspire other people to give back to the society. What is that?
Yeah. I work very hard my life, like many Chinese Americans, and I suffered through tremendous difficulties and met difficult challenges in China and come to America and try to fight for opportunity and try to find a way to be happy and build a life, American dream. But after some years, I found that I achieved certain success. I can put food on the table. I'm not hungry anymore. I asked myself, what is that I can do as an immigrant? Because as immigrants, we benefit from the wonderful freedom and the environment in this country, but also I wanted to see what we can do to contribute. So I'm a Christian, and I asked God, Christ, at that time, I said, what is I can do? I studied so much. I got 2 doctorate degrees, 1 doctorate degree in laser physics, finished my postdoctoral fellowship in MIT, and a 2nd doctorate degree in medicine from Harvard and MIT. So I said, God, what do you want me to do? You know, use all those hard-earned skills. And it was Christ who instilled in my mindset, Ming, you need to use your hard-earned skill to help those who need the most help. And I asked God, who do need the most help? And he said, blind, orphan, children. So these 3, whoever meet these 3 criteria, are the folks who need the most help. So that's why about 20-some years ago, I built a Sight Charity Foundation to specifically help blind orphan children from around the world. The film Sight, to be released by Universal Studios October 27th, in theaters across the United States, it's about the remarkable journey of some of these blind orphan children, their journey from darkness to sight.
Wow. What an amazing story. I just, in your book, that you mentioned that you are dedicating this book to a few people. I'm going to read this to Chen Wang, to my father, Dr. Chen Wang, my mother, Dr.
Alian
Xu, and your brother, and your wife, your son, and your godparents, and then also to your patients. So obviously, your patients, not just you're just giving them, you feel like you receive something from them too.
Yes. The reason I dedicate my book, From Darkness to Sight, for which the movie Sight is made.
I want to explain that, you know.
Yes, I try to, as for all immigrants, we have this balance we need to strike. On one end, we should not forget who we are, where we are from. At the same time, we cannot be stuck in the past and not embrace the present and future. So that difficult balance that every single immigrant has to find where you want to be in that spectrum to be happy. So for me, I'm trying to really recognize, remember where I'm from, who brought me to this world, who have not only fed me, but also more importantly, educated me. And in that, my parents. So the film site was dedicated to my father because they sacrificed so much. They saw beyond the circumstance at the time. That's what I have today. At the same time, I also want to embrace the present and future, to know who's guiding me towards the present and future, and along that line, Christ, Jesus Christ, that gave me sense of purpose. What I'm going to use the science tools as a tools. What's the purpose? What I'm going to use the tools for? But also my patients who I have the privilege to take care. As I've said, I perform 55,000 surgeries. Because these patients have taught me, most important thing they have taught me is to be a good doctor, I have to speak the language of listener. Because, especially for the eye, they are the only people who are seeing through the pair of eyes of theirs. So if I want to solve their eye problem, their vision problem, I have to speak their language. I have to look the world through their lenses, because I'm trying to figure out their eye problems. And very often doctors sometimes don't speak the language of the patients.
Wow, so that is such inspiring point of view. Like you always try to see from the other side.
Yes.
So you're seeking some kind of common ground.
Yes.
Where then we can communicate.
Yes.
So talking about common ground, because you have a book. It's called Common Ground, Bible study. What's that all about?
During the pandemic, my pastor, Dr. Rice Brooks, and I got together and we realized that the COVID has revealed even bigger virus in us. And that's the virus of polarization. The increased fixations among us rather than appreciating what we all have in common as fellow human beings or fellow Americans. The increased inability for all of us to work through issues across political aisles, racial divides, and ethnic divisions. And I realized as a Christian, God gave us an important duty that we should be the best common ground seekers. The Bible said the blessed are the peacemakers. In an unprecedented, fragmented world, polarized world, driven by human desire for power and control, Christians should really stand up, trying to bring our country back from the division and the fragmentation, back towards the path of unity, by being more willing to work together despite our differences, and by still be able to love someone despite the difference.
Wow. Your life, I mean, you went through a vast difference, obviously, more than average people for sure, from East to West, from a total Confucius atheist culture to Christianity, from poverty to prosperity. I mean, so how did you manage to reconcile those differences?
My driving force is I love life. I love life.
That's a good drive.
And I find that the way to love life, way to truly enjoy what life has offered to each of us, is to expand our horizon. If I confine myself in the East, I only know the Eastern tradition, Eastern culture, I will not have the opportunity to be exposed to learn all these wonders of another half of the world, which is the West. If I'm immersing myself just in science, I will not have the opportunity to be exposed to enjoy all the wonderful human heritage and about faith, and particularly the teaching of Jesus Christ. If I focus on myself, just the past, who I am, kind of live in Chinatown, speaking only Mandarin, and then I missed the opportunity to be part of the world culture and in terms of the West and other parts of culture. And if I'm stuck in my past, I will not have the opportunity to move forward, embrace the present. At the same time, I still have to remember where I'm from. So my driving force that I'm involved in so many different dimensions, like X, Y, Z, different, is based on driving force that I want to live my life the fullest. So I want to love life, and I realize the way to live is by expanding my horizon in every axis, whether it's faith and science axis, whether it's East-West axis, whether it's past and present and future axis, and whether it's various different form of human pursuit. I pursue science, but I also pursue art. I love dancing, I love music, and I find that people always say that, oh, I'm left brain, I'm logical, so I'm not good with art. Or some other people say, I'm right brain, I'm artistic, I'm not good with mathematics. But what I learned is that if I try to put the two halves of the brain together, I approach scientific projects such as eye surgery with artistry. I approach artistic endeavors such as ballroom dancing with physics. Then I'm able to synergistically combine my left and right brain and achieving the effect 1 + 1 be more than 2.
Well, a lot of people would say, okay, obviously Dr. Wang is very gifted. Okay, you have a gift, and you probably have a very high IQ. Okay, then some people would say, well, then he can, I'm not gifted, so I can't do it. But I feel like, other than your biological gift, do you have certain quality that you think that would make you try harder or make you different than the people who I know a lot of immigrants, they came to America and they say in Chinatown they even never learned how to speak English.
So the reason I wanted to make this film site, it's not about boasting that I'm gifted, though I probably medium-high level of IQ, and I've done something in life. I wanted to learn some lessons that can be generalized, can be applied by all the readers who read the book and see the film site. What is that they can take home to apply their own life? Along your line of question, that all of us have different gifts. God has given us different talents, and Christ works through us in His magical ways through each of us in our different areas. And I sometimes get this question asked, Dr. Wang, how do you achieve certain things in life if I think I'm not as gifted or something? And this is what I said, 2 things. One is, ask yourself, do you really want it? Because as human beings, we tend to blame on others. Well, I'm not successful because his fault or her fault. I want each of us ask ourselves sincerely this question, do you really want it? Because if we really want something as human beings, we may or may not be able to get it. But if we don't really want it, we have 0 chance to get it. So to be honest with ourselves, do you really want it? But second, wanting it is only half the story. The other half, you have to develop and learn the skill how to get it. And along that line, you have to learn that intentionally through time. When you have small setbacks, you try to overcome it, you build more confidence, and then you have next challenge, you find a different way to fight it, and you try to succeed, and that'll give you emboldenment, encouragement, you move on. So, desire, do we really want it? And second, if you really want it, it's not just a saying, you have to put in action, that is being intentional, being deliberate, and just like growing a tree, you have to keep on building the soil.
You got to work on it.
Yeah, you're going to work on it, and over time, your tree, which is your ability to get what you want, will grow. It doesn't come overnight. Really, do you really want it? Are you willing to be intentional and gradually building it?
Wow. Some other Chinese would also ask this question. I'm just going to say what they might say. A lot of people say, well, he's successful because he got a great dad and mom. And my parents are they didn't have education, my parents were poor, that's why he's better than me. He's better, make more money, or more successful than me. How do you respond to that?
Yeah. I think we need to really understand what we are learning from our parents.
How about your own experience? I mean, I'm pretty sure we're going to see that in the movie, but if you can talk a little bit, I heard on your introduction by Senator Bill Frist that you actually grew up in poverty.
Right.
It's not a very ideal situation.
Yeah. We were very poor, four of us, my parents, my younger brother, me. We lived on, it's $15 a month. It's extremely poor. Half the time I didn't have enough to eat. But what's amazing thing was, despite extreme poverty, we never have heater or air conditioning, telephone or bathroom or kitchen, nothing. The house is all communal,
like a lot of Chinese
facilities during this time. Yeah.
Because you grew up during Cultural Revolution,
yes,
right?
Yeah,
the
very
country
poor.
Pretty much a failed country.
Very poor. However, the remarkable thing is, despite the extreme poverty at the time, my parents saw something. They saw beyond the circumstance. They insisted on me studying. And that's what I have today, because of my parents instilled in me early on, imprinted in me those behavioral patterns that I take advantage of that, keep on driving myself later. So I would say for people who may grow in the more disadvantaged family, poor family, I think it's harder to be poorer than whole family live on $15 a month, That's our family at the time. But more importantly, to understand what is we're really learning from our parents. We're learning from our parents dedication to the family, sacrifice, and prioritizing children over their own benefit. Those are things we can learn. Doesn't matter what our parents do. They contribute to our spirit. They contribute with their heart. And it's their heart we're learning from our parents.
Right. So you dedicate the book to your parents, and so obviously you have a very, very loving parents who you feel like contributed to your life. At the end, you also say to God, the creator of all. And I do want you to talk about this because in China, everybody had almost like forced to be atheist. I believe that you grew up as an atheist, just as I did. But now we're both Christians. So what's your personal experience? I mean, there got to be a wow moment. Was there?
Yes.
Or some people gradually. Yeah.
There's a movie called God's Not Dead. It's a Christian film. In that movie, the Chinese student who went from atheist to a believer, that Chinese student is inspired by my life story. So that was me in that film, God's Not Dead. Yeah.
You mean you were in that movie?
Yeah, the characters play my part of the story.
Oh, okay.
My faith journey from atheist to a believer from China.
That was
America.
based on you too.
Exactly.
So this is your second movie, The Son.
Yeah, that movie. That movie. I'm one of the characters, but this side movie is my life journey. Now, what I learned was I grew up as an atheist, and I came to this country truly believing science will save the world. Then at Harvard Medical School, I was studying the eye, and I found it's so complicated, so complex. The number of neurons in each of our eyeball involving visual signal processing, capturing and processing, the number of cells involved in each of our eyeballs and the brain for vision is more than the number of stars that we have ever discovered in the entire universe. So here's the problem with the random atheist belief, that it's nearly impossible for all these cells to line up so neatly, and you have to line up so neatly in a very short period of time in order to process vision. Any molecules, any cells out of the line, your vision, the sense of vision will not be captured. So I was in trouble. I realized that my atheist, purely scientific viewpoint of the world would not explain some basic questions such as structure, function of the eye. Wow. Then I was studying science and art to be an ophthalmologist. Then I met a professor who I kept on asking questions. So one day he took me out to lunch. He said, Ming, what's a cross street? I said, that's a car. He said, what's the difference between a car and a human brain? And I said, human brain is a lot more complicated. He said, okay, can you imagine a random piece of metal assemble itself into a car? I said, no way. Then he leaned over, he said, how about human brain? Right there, he opened a window in my life, making me realize that the reason that human structure such as are so complicated and so nearly impossible assembled together by random collision is because it was not assembled by random collision. It was formed together with an intended purpose. There's a creator behind it. I further come to realize that science and faith is like the sides, the other sides of the two sides of the coin. Mm-hmm. Science and faith. Science is about...
So that means they cannot exist without each other.
They're complementary.
Right.
And they have to work together. Science is about what things are. Mm-hmm. Faith is about why things are. Mm-hmm. So God wants science and faith to work together because He loves us. He wants us to improve the quality of lives. And our quality of lives is improved only through research. Mm-hmm. But He wants us to do it in the right way, by preserving life, by preserving our moral, ethical principles mm-hmm. while conducting research. So it is wrong, either extreme. Pure scientists, mad scientists without respecting for life, mm-hmm. that's wrong. And pure folks on the faith camp who refuse to learn about science, that's wrong too.
I don't think that's God's will either.
Yeah, God wants these two to work together. In fact, we ask the question, why young people are leaving churches today? And there are 100 young kids entering college in America going to church. By the time they graduate from college 4 years later, 75 of the 100 are no longer going to church. Why? It's because they are studying science and technology in year 2023, when science and artificial intelligence exploding, and they no longer see the relevance mm-hmm. and the importance of faith. One student asked me, said, Dr. Wang, I don't need to know Christ. I can just be a good engineer if I study hard. And my answer is that, yes, you got to study hard. Otherwise, you don't have the tools. But in my life experience, I studied so hard, it was eventually that Christ gave me the idea to use my hard-earned medical skills, surgical skills, to help those who need the most help, which are blind, orphan children. I told the student that, yes, you can be a good engineer if you study hard. That's necessary. But that's not sufficient. The sufficient condition to be a good citizen of the world is you need to believe in Christ because science gives you the tools, and believe in Christ, as in my case demonstrated, that helping blind orphan children is give me a sense of purpose, what I'm going to use the tools for.
Mm-hmm. You know, as Jesus said, he is the light, and that's what mm-hmm. Christians believe.
Yes.
So so your movie, your book is from darkness to sight. Is this also there's symbolic meaning, not just the eyesight? It's also a spiritual awareness.
Yes. While the story is about me helping many blind orphan children come from physically from darkness to sight. Mm-hmm. In the process, I, as the eye doctor who restored their physical sight, I have been helped to come out of my own spiritual darkness to light. So that's these two parallel lines of the storyline, which is reflected in the movie Sight.
Wow, what a story. I can't wait to see the movie, and it's coming out on October 27th, is that right?
Yes.
Is it going to be released all over the United States?
Yes, it will be released by Universal Studios on October 27th, Friday, in theaters across the United States, and particularly for the Chinese American community. Mm-hmm. Through the films...
Where can people go to see?
Throughout, I think early October you'll be able to find online your local theaters. Okay. My main goal of writing the book and being involved in the movie, the film Sight, based on the book, my main goal is to use this book and the film for our next generation, for our children. Because our children, among Chinese Americans and many immigrants, we feel like they are not working as hard as us. of course, they have not struggled. They have more today. So rather than keep on instructing the kids and say, you got to do this, you cannot do that, kids don't listen. They will do the opposite, right?
Sure.
The best way to impact our children, to reconnect with them emotionally, is through telling them a story. Let them watch a film like Sight, to see their mommy and daddy at their age, because young people tend to be affected by kids on the same age, and struggle and hardship and challenges that we have gone through. So hopefully emotionally connect them, because they can identify themselves with the young Ming in the film growing up, right? Okay. And we have a chance, much better chance, to convey our desire and encourage, inspire our next generation to work harder. Second reason is I wanted to be able to tell the story of Chinese Americans immigrant to America. Because if I trying to overcome our almost genetic weakness that we work hard as Chinese Americans, but we don't speak up, we don't tell the story to the rest of the society, then we don't get recognized, right? And so I wanted to use myself as an example, telling my story, and hopefully to encourage other Chinese Americans who are much more successful than me in other fields, telling their story too. And that is for our children as well. Why? I want our next generation in America to grow up without having to suffer some of the unfairness, injustice, and some of the things such as Asian kids tend to be discriminated against in terms of getting to universities, by recognizing at the end it's our own responsibility, no one else's.
Exactly.
By having really the need to tell our stories.
Right. I have kids too. I definitely will bring my kids to watch the movie. And as a parent, I want my kids to live in a society where there's not that much people divide themselves, like either through race, color, financial, status. You want them to live in this American dream that is, you can work hard and you can achieve your dream, right? This is, well, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. Also, people ask, where can they get this book?
I see. The book is purchased on Amazon. And the film site is to be released by Universal Studios October 27th, Friday in theater across the United States. I do want to resonate a little bit about Leping. What you mentioned is very, very important. It's really the central ideation. That is, our world is so fragmented today, so polarized. People don't want to work together across political aisles, racial divides, and ethnic divisions. I think it's mainly because we're not looking enough inwardly at each of ourselves. We tend to follow human nature. Whatever happened,
blaming others.
Blame on others.
Of course, I do too.
Yeah, and I do as a human. I'm being a human being as well. That's a natural tendency.
Yes.
I want to use my book, From Darkness to Sight, and the film Sight, to really bring out the point that, as human beings, it is much better to travel the road less traveled. It's much better when we face challenging world, whichever issues we're dealing with today. We have opioid crisis, gun violence, racial discrimination, environmental crisis, all these things. To ask ourselves, what is it I can do to improve? What is it I can do to contribute to the solution, rather than complaining about it and rather than keep on blaming on everyone else? Unless we do that, we still will remain fragmented. But however, if we change ourselves, looking inwardly to recognize, to make the world a better place, is for each one of us as human beings to look in ourselves. What is I can do to help, rather than following human nature to blame on everybody else? The issue with the racial discrimination, the issue of the various different gun violence, opioid crisis. If we do that, we can make the world better places, because we will encourage the common ground seeking. If all of us are not so fixated on our differences, rather than appreciating what we all have in common as fellow human beings.
Wow, what a message. See beyond and seek common ground.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And hopefully we can see each other again.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.